In this video, we'll provide some insights into the performance of Thai-listed companies when assessed against Vigeo Eiris' ESG assessment framework. So if you look at this first graph, what you can see is the full range of scores for the 23 companies that we assessed today. So they range from 22 out of 100 for the weaker performers to 48 out of 100 for the best performer. Now, when we look at that spread overall, we see quite a tight concentration for around 18 companies with scores ranging from 33 to 48, all of which sit within what we consider to be our limited bracket. And there's a much smaller pool of what we might call ESG laggards sitting just behind. Flagged up in blue on that chart are all of the Thai companies that are signatories already to the UN Global Compact, which is often a great proxy for understanding how mature they are, how far along in their ESG journey they are, and the level of disclosure that they're outlining to the markets at this time. Now, when we look at the regional averages for Thai companies and we benchmark them against other countries from the region, but also the emerging market region overall, things appear quite favorable. So if we look at the ESG overall score for all Thai companies, it sits at 37 out of 100, which is well in advance of that same metric for Malaysia, which is at 29, China and emerging markets as well at 29. And when you do the same exercise for the environment average score, the social average score, and even the governance average score, the outperformance of Thai companies seems to bear true. Now, things look very different when we think about energy transition. Energy transition is a prime concern for many investors and many corporates. And when you look at the performance here, there's a much greater spread and a much greater variation, if you will. There are companies scoring as low as 3 out of 100 and companies ranking quite high at 55 out of 100. So a much higher level of diversity in terms of energy transition performance when compared to pure ESG performance. But again, that trend of Thai companies outperforming a mix of regional peers in terms of countries and also markets seems to bear true. So Thai companies have an energy transition average score of 32 out of 100. In Malaysia, it's 19, in China, it's 16, and emerging markets, it's 22. If we look a little bit closer at some of those leading companies, what we see is they're from the basic resources and extractive sectors. And that's not an unusual trend. We see that often across different jurisdictions where companies from these sectors, which are highly exposed to ESG risks and opportunities, tend to demonstrate a much higher level of ESG adoption compared to companies from other sectors where the risks and opportunities may be less evident or where they may be under less stakeholder pressure. Certainly the best performers in the Thai region show a high level of regional and sector competitiveness, but as you can see from their average scores themselves, they're still in our limited bracket, right? At 48 out of 100 or at 43 out of 100, that's indicating that in the absolute level, there is still considerable room for improvement, even if at the relative level, things look quite positive. Just digging a little bit more into the relative perspective, when we look at the performance of Thai companies within the emerging market region overall, you can see that they fare quite favorably when compared to emerging market peers. There are 844 other companies in our emerging market research, and you can see that some of the best Thai performers are ranking in that top 50. And when we run the same simulation then over our full universe, in which there are 4,800 plus companies, we see a similar favorable impression there, with the best performing Thai companies ranking just outside the top 500 in our rated universe. So overall, a positive picture, but certainly room for improvement in the long term.